It's a new year, we have a new president. Today we're going to take a look at how real estate is going to change in 2025 with the new presidential administration. I'm Michael Darmanin, CEO of Sell State Realty, and I think today we're going to discuss something that's very important that's on a lot of people's minds, which is, okay, new year, new presidential administration, what is going to happen with real estate? The first thing we want to look at is the economy at large. Now, every president that goes into office particularly tries to solve the economic issues. We know that. One of the things, though, with President Trump is that he really prides himself and prided his whole campaign on the notion of solving the economy in America. He wants to make things good, wants to make things moving. Now, how does that impact us in the real estate world? It really is one of the cornerstone elements of any economy. And the reason for that is pretty obvious when you start looking into it. There's a lot of industry and business spin-off effect from real estate. Think about when somebody buys a new home. A lot of times there's renovations that are going to be done. Maybe small renovations like simply painting, maybe large renovations. Maybe it's going to be things like flooring. People often have to buy new furniture. They buy new dishes. A lot of times will even go out and buy themselves a new car to go along with their new home. So we see a lot of these things happen as a result of people purchasing new homes. As homes are purchased and inventory decreases, we often see situations where construction picks up. This leads to a lot of building and trades and materials. So we know that real estate is a main cornerstone of any strong economy. And as such, we can expect that this is going to be a large focus for the current administration. They're absolutely going to want to get the real estate market moving as quickly as possible because they know that that will assist in part in growing out the economy, which is something that they've made very clear is extremely important to them. Now, further to the idea that real estate is an important part of an economy, let's consider the president himself. President Trump has a long-standing history of real estate investments and doing very well in real estate and being very involved in real estate. So not only is this an important factor for any president when it comes to economics, so we know that with any president, real estate is very important to the economy, and with this president in particular, there's a lot of personal history there. We can expect that President Trump will do what he can to get the real estate economy moving as quickly as possible in America.
It's free real estate.
All right, I think the next thing that we need to really discuss is interest rates and mortgage rates by association. Now, interest has gone up over the last several years, we know that, and as a result, mortgage rates have followed. And whenever money becomes more difficult to borrow, it becomes more difficult for people to purchase homes. Let's face it, most people don't have enough cash on hand to just write a check for their home and rely on financing to be able to purchase. With the interest rates up and the mortgage rates up, we know that that's slowed down a lot of the buyers in the real estate economy. So what is happening with that? Well, a few things. Number one, we have seen a slight decrease in interest rates. However, the mortgage rates have not dropped to follow. Now, some of that is based on the 10-year yield, where they're looking at economic factors and saying, typically, when economies do well, interest has to kick in. And the reason for that is it has to curb inflation. Now, without getting into a whole economics lesson, those are kind of the basics of it. When an economy gets hot, the longer it goes, the hotter it is. Typically, you will see interest rates start to kick in. So now we're at a situation where the current president is out there essentially promising that the economy is going to improve. But at the same time, we want to see the interest rates come down. So those kind of work against each other. Now, what's happening a little bit also is that the lenders are sort of making up for lost time, if you will. So while interest rates have gone down a little bit, the mortgage rates have not followed. And while that may not make sense to some people, one of the reasons contributed to that is the fact that so many people locked in their mortgages or purchased a new home or refinanced at the much lower interest rates from several years ago. And now a lot of the lenders are looking to sort of recuperate that. Now, President Trump has already made statements that the interest rates are too high and that those need to be dealt with. To be determined what's going to happen there, but we can expect that the interest rates will be heading down. And as a result, we could see the mortgage rates start to follow that. If the mortgage rates start to drop, we should see a corresponding increase in buying activity, and that, of course, will be helpful for the real estate market. All right, let's talk now a little bit about inventory, because inventory is kind of a really funny topic to discuss these days.
That's actually hilarious.
If you look present day, so right now, end of January 2025, most markets in America, when you look at the real estate inventory, people will tell you there's plenty of it. If you're looking to buy a home, you have a lot of selection, you can take your time, you don't have to rush an offer on the first place you see because you're in a panic someone's going to beat you to it. A lot of sellers are making concessions right now, and we've even seen situations where home prices are dropping a little bit. So, in a snapshot point of view, you would expect that the inventory is plentiful. We have quote unquote too much inventory, lots of inventory. I've been hearing things like this for months. Now, the reality of it is, when you look at a larger picture scale, we are actually showing data that suggests that we're actually short on inventory on a national level. Going into the 2020s, we were way behind on inventory, and not only that, but we were way behind on the building side of things because, believe it or not, going right back to the big crash in 07, 08, 09, a lot of builders lost a lot of their inventory chains. They lost a lot of their skilled labor. That labor force was only about 80, 85, 90% recovered when COVID hit, and that caused a whole other set of issues. So believe it or not, we've been behind on building for better part of 10 years now. So how does that matter? Well, the other thing we have to look at is who's buying the homes. And the largest buying demographic in America are the millennials. Now, one of the factors to consider here is that a lot of millennials are buying a home, but they're not selling a home. They're buying their first home, which means they're taking something off the market without replacing it with something that would be available for someone else. The other thing we're seeing is this concept of downsizing. As people get older, a lot of times what will happen is, okay, the kids have moved out, we can downsize our home, we don't need as much space as we used to have. But there's a trend that has been growing, which is kids grow up in a home, they move out, they go away to university or college, they get their degrees, and then they end up moving back home for a period of time.
All right, that's it! No television for a week. What?
As a result of this, what we're seeing is fewer people are as quick to downsize because the thought of, okay, once the child goes off to university or college somewhere, that's it. They've moved out. They've left the nest, so to speak. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. So people aren't as quick to downsize because they expect, well, the kids are going to come back home after they graduate until they can go and get themselves set up and find, their career and move off to their own places.
I'm sorry, who is this gentleman sitting behind you?
Hello, Ms. Lady. I'm Dale. I'm Brennan's stepbrother.
So as a result, there's a lot of underlying data that really suggests that there's not nearly as much inventory. Okay, so I just told you that there's plenty of inventory, you can shop for a home, but at the same time there's too much inventory. So which is it? Well, it's kind of both. What we're expecting is that when the buyers start coming back in what would be considered a more regular rate. Now, there's a lot of things that could push that. If the economic conditions get better, people are more able to spend. If the mortgage rates come down, people are more able to borrow money towards the purchase of a home and will start spending. Whatever it is that gets the buyer started, what we may see and what we're predicting will happen is the existing inventory will be soaked up very quickly. Once that happens, we're going to get back into a situation of multiple offers. And once that picks up and the media starts running with that, we could actually see another frenzy kick up. The inventory situation is something to keep an eye on over the next year because while it may seem plentiful in many markets across the country, the reality of it is, big picture, if buyers come back at what we'd consider a normal rate, we will see that inventory picked up very quickly, and that should lead to a market heating up fairly fast. Okay, so the big question is when? When is all this going to happen? And I would love to tell you I've got a crystal ball in my office that reveals all answers and I would be able to give you an exact date. So the reality is we don't know when. Now, some people who are very enthusiastic about the current situation and where they think the economy is heading are expecting things to change very, very quickly. Something to keep in mind though is that companies are going to be quicker to want to pocket the difference and increase their profitability than to drop their prices. And let me explain. As we looked at the cost of oil increasing, we saw a ripple effect that caused cost of living to go up. So if you imagine if it's more expensive to put gas in your car and now you're suddenly dealing with a courier service, well, they're fueling an entire fleet. So suddenly shipping products becomes more expensive. Shipping goods, shipping materials becomes more expensive. When that happens, the cost of selling the good, the cost of producing that good goes up. So the cost to the consumer goes up. So if you take an item that, let's say, for example, was able to be sold at $10. Well, now, let's just say, for example, that $10 item cost the company $7 to produce and sell, and so they were making a $3 profit. Well, now it costs $15 for them to make that same product. So the price had to go up to $18, or maybe even they pushed it to $20. So let's assume now that the economy gets better, a lot of the supply chain costs come down, and suddenly instead of costing $15 to create that item, they can get that cost down to $10, $12. Now we're excited as a consumer. We think, great, I used to pay $10 for this item, now I'm paying $20 for this item. The cost to create this item is now down to $10, $12. So this item should cost me $14, $15 at most. So I'm going to start recognizing savings, or at the very least, I will be spending less on it. The way most companies will react initially is that instead of saying, okay, it's costing us 15, we're selling it for 20, we're making a $5 profit. Now it's costing us, say, 12, we can drop the price down to 17 and make a $5 profit. What a lot of companies will do is leave the price at $20, and now they're making an $8 profit. And now they're thrilled because their bottom line's gone up. So how does that work? The economic factor suggests that costs should be coming down, but yet to the consumer, we may not see an immediate effect. The market competition is what's going to solve that. So now here we are with this widget at $20. It used to be 10, now it's 20. The company continues to sell it at 20. And suddenly a competing company comes in the market and sells us the same product for $14. As more and more people shift over and start buying this thing at $14, we see the initial company selling it at $20 start to reduce theirs down to closer to a $14, $15 mark. It's an oversimplification of how market conditions work and how they react, but what's important to take away from this is it does require a ripple effect. So just because the current administration may be out there with the goal of trying to completely get the economy going seemingly overnight, the reality it is any change that goes into effect, A, may take time to get into effect, and B, once in effect, may take time to ripple out. I mentioned a few moments ago that the inventory is actually not as plentiful as it may seem, and once the buyers start coming back, we could see a situation where we get back into more of a heated market, possibly even a buying frenzy, multiple offer situation. Now, we don't know when that's going to be. Our best estimates are first quarter for sure is probably going to be a carryover of what we saw last year, but as we get into the second quarter and particularly into the third quarter, we should see enough things in effect where the rippling has gone through, particularly if we see things like interest rates and mortgage rates by association drop. So be aware that it's good to be optimistic over what's coming in real estate in 2025, but it may take a few months to get there. And there's things that we should start doing now to start planning for that. All right, so we have a very positive outlook on what could happen and should happen in real estate in 2025. So how do we get ready for it? Well, the first thing we have to understand is how we're communicating to our clients. And one of the things that I think is very important for buyers to understand is traditionally the best time to get a deal on a home tomorrow is to buy that home today. When you look at historical housing prices, they go up. If we go back to the worst crash in the history of real estate in 07, 08, 09, even 2010, depending where you are in the country. And now if you look at historical pricing, even with that huge crash, the worst crash we've ever seen in real estate, what you see is a graph that goes up and a little blip, and then the prices continue to escalate. So we know that prices are going to go up. We can look at inventory levels and predict that things are going to heat up from a buyer side, which could lead to some frenzying. When that happens, even though mortgage rates may come down, the cost of the home may go up. So right now, it's a good time to start messaging to your clients. You really want to work with your sphere of influence. This is vital. All those people out there that you know, people you've worked with in the past, friends, family, referrals, you should be reaching out to them right now and start finding out who's thinking about purchasing a home this year. And if so, you really want to start talking to them about doing this sooner rather than later. There's a very good chance they could beat the rush by getting in on this over the next few months. Work with sellers while they could potentially get concessions. Now would be an excellent time to get your buyers off the fence and into the market. Anytime you have a change in political parties, there's always a big reaction one way or the other. Some people are going to be very excited and some people are going to be very upset and or horrified at the results of the election. As people in business, it's important that we don't get too caught up on who won, who's president, which party won, and look at what are the effects going to be. When one team's in place, there's going to be certain effects. When the other team's going to be in place, there's going to be certain effects. And that's what we're trying to do today. We're not here to decide if this is going to be a good presidency or a bad presidency. We're just trying to look at what are the effects of this presidency going to be specifically on the real estate market. Now, we have very positive outlooks for 2025 and going forward. We think the real estate market has been on a bit of a slide and has been kind of in a spot where it looks like it wants to make the turn. Inventory levels suggest that the turn is going to be very possible. It just needs something to kind of spark and get that going. And we think interest in mortgage rates could be one of the factors that does that. If you liked what you saw today, if you have your own thoughts, comments, suggestions, maybe your feelings on what the economy is going to do, what real estate is going to do, be sure to comment below. Like, subscribe to the channel, share the video. I know this one is one that a lot of people are very curious about, questions I've been getting about, things I've been discussing with our SellState franchise owners about what we expect is going to happen in 2025. Lots to cover today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Until next time, this is Michael with SellState.